doctors have to do in a pain consultation is to be creative and innovative, to use language to try and achieve a communication which will allow a good diagnosis and a good outcome. So yeah, it's a great topic, but it is very sensitive, and some of your students may quite possibly say, sorry, I don't want to go there. Any more? Or are we approaching coffee? There's one at the back.
Hello, I'm Pim Yupa from Ratchasima University, about 3 hours from here. Thank you for your talk. I always thought about how scientific advancement could probably create something to for the doctor to kind of feel our pain when the patients go to the doctor's office. If there can be a tool, kind of equipment to transfer our pain to the doctor so that he can feel how we feel, that would be great. But I don't think that is possible. So I think communication is the most important thing, like you said. My question is that what research tools do you use in your work to train doctors to maybe listen and communicate better with patients, and for patients to communicate more effectively to doctors? You mentioned conversation analysis, and do you use that in your work, or what else do you use?
Okay, we are starting some big projects with surveys online for patients, particularly women with pelvic pain, to tell us what sort of language they use when talking about it to themselves and to their medical practitioners. There are, to our knowledge, there is almost no training in intercultural communication for medical specialists anywhere. It's an astonishing gap. There is training on how to talk to your patients, doctor-patient interaction and so on. But this area is one which is almost untouched. There is in Australia and internationally, there are societies for the study of pain, and they are moving in this direction. Last year was the International Year for Pain Education, with the body that I told you about before. And in each country you will find a branch of the medical profession which has normally the College of Anaesthetists or the College of General Practitioners will have a particular part which is dealing with pain. But given that pain is 40% of the reasons why you go to the doctor, and there is no course for undergraduates in Australia for medical students which deals with pain, we are actually at a point where a great deal of work needs to be done, and my job is to find out how language is actually used by people in pain, and then to find ways in which we can turn those into materials, probably online, for the instruction of doctors and patients. And interculturally, of course, it's even worse. But in Thailand you have a laboratory with medical tourism, and I think something which is very important to your national economy, which could be used also in Vietnam, by the way, for the improvement of communication between doctors and patients.
All right, any more questions? Okay.
Will you allow me to take off my jacket? I find that talking is hot work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor Success. Okay, I have a question, because just now you talked a lot about from the perspective of a doctor. Okay, as a doctor, we can train the patients, we can lead them, guide them something. But my question is, if we think about from a perspective of a patient, how can we stamp out from sort of a conservative situation, like Vietnamese women? They rely on the man to help for the communication.
Yeah.
How can we help the patient like this to communicate directly and more efficiently, more effectively in sort of a conversation between the doctor and the patient?
Oh, huge question. Very good one. Okay. First thing is that in cultures where women tend to rely on men for almost as interpreters, we are talking about a change of cultural practice which goes back hundreds of years. And that actually is very hard to achieve. But in Vietnam at the moment, I think the majority of young trainee doctors are in fact women. And certainly in the study being done by my student in Hue, most of the doctors she talked to were in fact younger female practitioners. And one of the interesting things was that she discovered that young female doctors spend much longer in consultations with their patients than the male doctors. They spend more time developing empathy and good relations with the patients, and in encouraging the patients to be more responsive and more proactive. So there is a change underway in medicine in Vietnam, and I suspect in other countries as well. Many of the patients with chronic pain that I told you about have been going to doctors for years. They might have had, shall we say, a broken leg. The leg was fixed, but the pain kept on going. Because basically your pain pathways, which transmit pain up your spine to your brain, which is where you feel pain, they just keep on going when the cause of the pain has vanished. Right? And that's a very, very difficult thing to treat. They have great experience of doctors. They have often seen 20 or 30 doctors. They have been given different medications and opioids and pills and painkillers. And by the time they get to see my colleagues, they have been swapping doctors for a very long time, and they are almost over-trained as patients. Right? Most people go to the doctor with not chronic pain, but you know, I caught my finger in the door, it's bruised, can you give me something to make it feel better? Right? These people have no training in being a pain patient. Now what we are looking at doing is creating videos to put online to say, when you go to the doctor, here are some things which you should know the doctor needs to hear. Right? Here are the things that you can talk about. Here are the sorts of issues which are relevant. Okay. So there are, I think, ways in which we can use online training, and certainly with nurses who are very often the front line of contact with patients. They are particularly good at not the god doctor, but the patient sees the nurse on an everyday basis, and they develop an interpersonal relationship which can be much richer than the one where you see the doctor once or twice in the course of your treatment. There is a big role here for applied language people like you and me, and for the sorts of training that we can help our students to achieve. Because when we go to doctors, most of us are novices, right? We have very little experience in being a good patient. Now, I've been talking to people with pain now for 10 years, and I know something about it, so that when I fell off my bicycle a while ago, I ride a bike about 100 kilometers a week. I knew how to talk to the doctor about what had happened. But most of my friends who ride bikes and go to the doctor are basically starting from zero. They simply don't know how to address a medical practitioner, and also whether they should offer information or wait for the doctor to ask the questions. Now, in most of Asia, the doctor is still up there and the patient is still down here, and so you have a situation where spontaneous talk by the patient, which may be a very important source of information and also of discovering how badly the patient is feeling, this is, if you like, hidden behind a cultural wall. And is even worse when, shall we say, a Vietnamese patient goes to see a doctor in Australia who might be an English-speaking Australian doctor who has no understanding of the traditional Asian values of being modest and reticent and not being, if you like, pushy when you see a doctor. So globalization is giving us another set of problems which we have to deal with. And remember, again, it is not only your quality of life, it can be your life itself if you can't explain what's going wrong.
Thank you very
That's
much.
cheerful, isn't it?
Hello, good
Yes, sir.
morning. Good morning, I'm William. Your talk is very timely because this happened to my wife a few weeks ago in the hospital. She had that vehicular accident. And I just want to ask you, in your study, have you ever encountered a patient who looked for a doctor who was with the same nationality? And plus, is there a chance that you have encountered, I don't know if if the gender has a factor of this pain language. Because at first, the male doctor, who is an American, he was the first one who asked questions about my wife. Although he had that pain vocabulary and pain scale, something like, kindly rate your pain from 0 to 10, something like that. But my wife told to that doctor, can I speak with a female Filipina in the Philippines?
Yes.
Can I speak with the Filipina doctor?
Yeah.
And then that's the time that my wife told everything about pain, because that pain has something to do with feeling, and she preferred to talk with the same gender. And then I'm trying to relate that situation in my classroom, in our university, that I have a colleague who is an American, but my students were always going to my office, telling their feelings, their emotions, their pains about that professor. And then I told them, you can tell your problems to your professor, but sir, we prefer to talk with you. Something like the culture has something to do with the problem or pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I told you that in Australia we have 240 languages. There are a lot of doctors from India, and patients from India tend to choose doctors from India. There are parts of our cities which are strongly Vietnamese, with Vietnamese medical practices, and the Vietnamese people will tend to go to Vietnamese doctors. And this is understandable. I would prefer to talk to a doctor from my own cultural background if I were overseas. And I have been a patient in other countries and was aware that there were problems of communication. Right? The gender thing is very important in issues relating to reproduction and urology and similar areas. Women prefer to see women doctors about certain problems, and I certainly prefer to see a male doctor about certain male issues. We still have the idea that the doctor is not gender neutral. You know, the doctor is visibly male or female, and so you have an issue there which may or may not be important to individuals. Certainly, I think the older you are, the more you tend to be oriented towards gender preference. And my father was very comfortable with male doctors and was very uncertain with female doctors. Now, part of it, as you say, people come to you and say, look, I feel I can talk directly to you. You must be a person who shows empathy and friendliness in the classroom, and that's great. There are other individuals who are personally more distant, and also people from some cultures tend to be a little bit more distant. And for example, in Australia we don't like using titles very much. It's a national habit. In other countries, titles are normally, respectfully expected when you talk to someone who has a position of some seniority. Now, when I'm overseas, I always obey the rules of the place where I am in order to show respect for the country where I am. In a multilingual, multicultural institution like your classroom, you get problems of students who are adapting to different values. And I think the best thing to do is to encourage diversity, and so those who want to talk to you can, but to encourage your colleagues to be more accessible. But some of my older colleagues feel that being accessible actually reduces their status as intellectuals. Right? That the students are still, if you like, learning, and they are in a different kind of universe. I don't agree, but that's just me. But again, from the point of view of pain, something intensely personal, intensely real, and sometimes very urgent. If you've ever had a bad toothache, you know how urgent it is. All right? You need to get to a doctor now, you need painkillers, you need the thing fixed. And in order to be able to express that in a way which the doctor will find credible, and not just exaggerated, that's problematic as well.
Well, unfortunately, we run out of time, so may I please call upon the chair, Dr. Suranaree Sipo, to kindly present a token of appreciation to our distinguished speaker.
Thank you very much. Professor Dr. Roland Sussex, for your very interesting and very timely talk for all of us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.